Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the incredible Kerrie Searle. Kerrie is an animal communicator and flower essence practitioner based in Australia. During this inspiring episode, we dive into the concept of telepathic communication, a skill inherent in all of us that we are sadly taught to doubt and ultimately ignore. We discuss the desperate need for more balance between logic and intuition, and also masculine and feminine in both the world and our lives, and marvel at the extraordinary untapped wisdom and knowledge that could be available to us if we can set aside the many hierarchies prevalent in society, whether that relates to different species or even between our many cultures and religions. Welcome, Kerrie, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. It's lovely to have you with us. I sort of like to start each episode just asking people a little bit about their nature story and how nature's been a part of their life so far. I don't know if that's evolved for you as well. And anything you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, I think nature is now a huge part of my life, and all aspects of nature, not just animals, not just trees, but all aspects, because for me, through the trauma I experienced in my life, I was very disconnected, very shut down, very suppressed. 17 years in the police force has certainly disconnected me from nature. And then being sort of physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically broken by the time I'd finished as a police officer, I had to somehow find my way back to myself. I had to somehow reconnect with the parts of myself that I'd lost along the way. And for me, that reconnection was certainly about being in nature, whether it be the beach. I live in a coastal town, so I'm particularly drawn to the ocean. Being in the land that I live on, where I live, we have indigenous moona trees, tea trees, beard heath, boobiella. And so part of my healing journey of reconnecting to those lost parts of myself was to actually get out and sit myself in nature. And it was doing that and doing my own holistic healing, doing that actually reopened my ability to be able to communicate with animals. So it was, I went from being incredibly suppressed and shut down to starting to feel and experience and being able to communicate with nature, animals, other beings. So nature for me is somewhere that I can ground, that I can be still, that I have to connect regularly with aspects of nature to do the work that I do. Yeah,
I think, well, there's two things I'd like to talk about there. Obviously, probably let's start with what you do, and then we'll probably go back to I think trauma, because that is a huge part of everyone's lives, and especially over the recent years. And I also think it's moving to the fore as well, isn't it? There was, for a long time, trauma was something that was not really discussed, and also quite sort of, behind closed doors. It was also something that was thought of was just sort of reserved for people who'd been in really horrific situations, sort of I suppose like soldiers and things like that, whereas now there's a much greater understanding coming to the fore that actually a lot of people suffer trauma, and sort of little traumas that build up and become overwhelming. So
so I'm an animal communicator, and often people will say to me, what is that? What do you do? So essentially, I communicate telepathically with all species of animals. And my healing journey has meant that through working really hard to connect deeply within myself means that I now have an incredibly deep connection with all species of animals right across the planet. So when people go, how do you communicate? I get feelings, words, pictures, smells, and tastes. And I also teach workshops helping people to find where their blocks are, why they can't hear their animals, or, and, in talking about trauma, it's interesting because the people and the animals that I tend to attract or work with into my workshops, or whether I'm consulting in a one-on-one, a lot of the times there's either been trauma in the animal or there's been trauma in the human. And I do sometimes work with just the humans as well. And it's not about me fixing, it's about me holding the space for that being to be able to journey to the place of trauma. And then I work with flower essences, whether they be Australian bush flower essences, bark flower essences. I make my own flower essences from the indigenous trees and plants on the land that I live. I recently worked with whales up in Queensland in Australia, and we made a whale. I made a whale essence.
Oh, amazing.
So it's an incredibly amazing world, and people think it's a gift. It's a gift that I've got. It's actually something that we're all capable of doing. We are all born with that ability to telepathically communicate with other beings. Telepathic just means feeling over a distance. And if you watch young children, they do it automatically. It's just so normal to feel, understand, communicate with animals. When they talk about imaginary friends, they're not imaginary because children can still see energy. They can still feel energy. So, but of course they go to school, and school is all about being in the left side of your brain, the logical side of your brain. So, you get taught that's a really good imagination.
Yeah.
But now we need you to concentrate on the important stuff. Your reading, your writing, your maths. And we actually get taught to disconnect from that knowing, intuitive part of ourselves.
Well, and so, to doubt it as well, don't we? It's not just disconnecting it, but doubting it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even now, because I know you and I have spoken a number of times, even now when I'm working and I get a really strong knowing feeling or message to say or do something, my left logical brain will go, what are you doing that for? Don't do that. Don't say that. Why are you saying that? And it doesn't mean that part of me doesn't exist anymore, but what it means is I'm more in balance.
Yeah.
And we need our logical brains. That's what made me a really good detective for 17 years, being able to follow evidence and the logic and the science. But it's got to be in balance.
Yeah.
And we need, that's something else I teach in my workshops, how to distinguish between the subtle difference of the left logical brain and the knowing intuitive part of ourselves, because we do get the messages of knowing and intuition, but then the logical brain doesn't trust. And like you just said, we get the message and then we go, no, that can't be right. And we actually stop trusting ourselves.
Yeah, I think because I've done a workshop with you many years ago now, and I have always sort of people have different ways of feeling things, and I think one of my strongest memories of communicating with one of my animals was actually my horse Bear. And we'd had some hay through the winter, and they're not fussy eaters. They're, you put food in front of them, they're quite happy to get on with it. And we'd had a couple of bales that they were just like, and it was the middle of winter, so there wasn't much grass. So literally, if they didn't eat their hay, then they weren't eating. And we'd come, and they were quite cross. They were like, well, we haven't eaten it. I was like, well, there must be something wrong with it. And I'm smelling it and thinking, well, it's not moldy. It seems fine. It's, not horrible. And I was having a conversation with the supplier, and we were actually in the field, and these words just like literally fell out of my mouth, and I was like, where did they come from? And it was something I'd not thought of before at all. And I basically said, I think a fox had weed on it. And, you know, it's not a common thing to think about, hey, because we
No.
keep it in a closed stable. And
Yeah.
the supplier said, oh, it's funny you should say that because we have seen a few foxes around the haystack. And at that point, I was like, I looked over and Bear was looking at me, and I thought, yep, that was Bear. I had no, and it was such a strange sensation because these words literally left my mouth with
Yeah.
like, and they weren't, there was no thought in my brain beforehand. And I was just
Yeah.
like, and as they were coming out, I was listening to myself going, my goodness, I'm like, why
Yeah.
would I say that? And sort of waiting for this odd reaction. And then the reaction was, well, actually, yeah, you're probably right. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's knowing as well how things
Yeah.
kind of bubble up for you as well, isn't it? Like you said, you get
Yeah.
pictures and feelings and
Yeah. It's understanding our own unique way of communicating, because, I will sometimes have clients say to me, oh, I want to be able to communicate exactly like you. And it's like, well, I can help you communicate with your animal, but I don't think two humans on the planet do it exactly the same way, because we're so unique in personality.
yeah.
So it's about, when I was listening to you talk about Bear, when you said the words literally fell out of my mouth with no thought, that's when we know it's our knowing and our intuition. Because the subtle difference between our knowing and intuition and our logical left brain is our knowing and intuition is not attached to any outcome. It's not attached to any emotion. It doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't yell or scream, jump up and down, and it will not have a conversation with you about it. It simply gives you the information and then it's done.
Yeah.
Then what happens, and this all happens very quickly, then what happens, the logical brain takes over and says, who said that? Now, where did you get that from? How did you know it was a fox? Did you see the fox? Did someone tell you it was? And when you know that you're having this analytical conversation, that's when you know you're no longer in your knowing or your intuition. Yeah. It can sound the same, but as soon as you're having a conversation, and with knowing and intuition, it normally, there's a feeling of, I'll never forget one of my nieces when she was quite little. And I remember my sister saying to her, how do you know that when Maggie, our dog, talks to you? How do you know? Because she would regularly say, Mum, Maggie's got an earache. Can you ring Kezzy to bring her drops? Or Mum, Maggie's got a pain in the tummy. And I remember my niece's response was, what do you mean? How do I know? I just know. And
how do you not know? Kind of.
Yeah. In that moment, I thought that just sums it up perfectly. Yeah. I just know. Yeah. And I know, I watch myself when I work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, often I will say this or do this, and it happened today. I went off on this tangent. I'm watching myself and I thought, where am I going with this? This does not make sense. And I actually said to the human client, just bear with me. I'm heading down a path. I've got no idea where this is going, but I'm just trusting that that's where I need to go. And yep, it took us exactly where her dog needed us to go in order to help with a diagnosis of what it had going on. Now, our logical brain, my left brain's going, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. I don't know where you're going. You need to stop. It doesn't make sense. Now, I hear what it's saying, and I don't tell it to shut up, but I do go, thanks for that. But I'm actually just going to follow my knowing here because I've got a feeling. Yeah. I've got a feeling I'm on the right track. So I follow it.
And that comes back to your being connected again, doesn't it? And
yeah. Because if we are, and as humans, we're taught to disconnect. We're taught to not be connected. We're taught to be very scientific. If there's evidence, then it's true. If it's factual, if it's true, if it's scientific, it's true. When we start to venture down that path of knowing and intuition, there's no book or manual or anything that says this is what it looks like, because it's quite unique for every different human. It's quite unique for every individual. So, some people get feelings, some get pictures, some get a word, some get colors, some get smells, and it's the part where if we can be curious and just go, oh, okay, I've just got this feeling, or I've just got this, I'm just going to see where that goes.
Yeah.
And it's about being in balance with the both parts.
And it can feel quite scary, can't it? I think I know it's quite a popular word, and I think it's overused a little bit, but I'm actually an empath as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did I did my animal Reiki masters probably almost about a decade ago now. And I had a very strong reaction in that. I was working at a horse rescue sanctuary. That was actually where we did our course.
Yeah.
And there was a little pony that I'd worked with previously that had actually she was very shut down.
Yeah.
And she came over and stood beside me, and I started crying, and it was a very strange sensation because I was sort of standing in a group of sort of 10 or 15 people, and I had tears like properly streaming down my face. I mean, like massive, loads of water going on. And I was like, and I remember, and I was standing there, and I was sort of doing this like scan of my body, going, "Why am I crying in public? Like
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly sad. Why am I?" And then it was like this very slow, because my logical brain was not, slow realization that actually they weren't my tears, and I wasn't sad, and it's that feeling of almost a loss of control in a way, like you have these feelings pass through you that aren't yours, and it can be very overwhelming. I mean, I've spent probably that was really my first realization that actually I was so strongly affected by the feelings and emotions of people around me, to the point that I can actually like sort of embody and feel them myself. And so the last sort of decade has been a massive journey into understanding that, and sort of and learning to manage it as well, and being very aware of, and it's not just crying, it's like anger outbursts as well, and and it's that, it's not, I mean, it's not losing control, you aren't out of control, but it is, this awareness that actually, as humans, we like to think we're in control of everything, don't we? And actually
we do.
That, and again, I suppose that comes back to connection and balance, and controlling is quite a sort of masculine trait, isn't it? Whereas, which is very prominent in our society.
And I think for me, when I look back at my own journey, I was in a very masculine orientated world for 17 years. And in fact, I'm currently doing a lot of work with reconnecting with my feminine that I actually completely shut down and suppressed. But what I did was, through my healing work, I went from being really suppressed and shut down. I kind of blew myself open. I went to the other extreme. And I remember roughly for about the first 3 months when I realized, and there are stories on my website that you can read, so I won't go into detail, but when I first realized that I could hear my dog, and then I could hear all animals and other beings, I was literally awake for about 3 months every night, because what would happen was I didn't actually know what to do with that. So, I would go to bed at night, and then I would, have no distractions, and I would just have all these animals and beings talking to me and wanting my attention. And I was like, I can't do this. I actually can't go to bed at night and lay awake all night listening to these beings. And I realized it was about being in balance. So when I work, because I get feelings, very strong feelings. So when I'm working with an animal, my body will tune into their body, and I will receive every feeling, every ache, every pain, every thought, absolutely everything. So when I'm verbally communicating with the human, I can be crying, I can be almost feeling like I'm going to vomit, I can be in panic, I can be in terror, I can be angry. And the trick, if you like, for me in the beginning was, like you were saying, was distinguishing between what's mine and what's actually theirs. And I will often say to a human client, okay, you hear my voice start to quiver now. That's not my grief. That's your animal's grief. And sometimes there'll be tears. And I'm like, there's really deep grief in your animal. And they're like, oh, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I can feel. But what I've learned to do is, rather than holding on to once I've got the feeling and I've got the extent of the information that the animal wants to give me, I then let that go.
Yeah.
So, in an hour consult with an animal, I can experience so much on a physical and emotional and spiritual and energetic and mental level. But that's the level of deep connection that I have with the animals. And in order to keep doing the work that I'm doing, I do need to keep that in balance. I do need to regularly space clear. For example, I never finish one consult and then go straight into the other without clearing, because I don't want to carry any of that energy through.
And then how do you do that, Kerrie? Because I think that's quite useful for people in everyday life, isn't it, as well?
Absolutely.
If you've had a sort of quite intense reaction, or even just a regular practice around your house.
Yeah. I space clear so regularly that for example, every morning when I get out of bed, I pull the doona and the sheets back, I open the windows, and I actually have a space clearing essence. So there's many different ways. Some people use white sage. I actually make a space clearing essence out of flower essences and also aromatherapy oils.
Yeah.
And I spray every morning because I know, for me, every night in bed, if I'm dreaming or processing, events, because I not only connect to animals, but I connect to what's happening right across the planet.
Yeah.
And we all know, especially, having just gone through COVID, that when there's an intense process or intense things happening on the planet, it impacts us and it impacts our animals. So if we make it a regular practice, if you like, even in winter, to just open our windows either at the start of the day, during the day, or at the end of the day. Not so easy to do in winter, but I do, if I'm working, especially in my office where I am now, my windows are constantly open. There's a fan that blows the air. I use the space clearing essence. I burn candles. I use aromatherapy. Sometimes white sage. Even the simple act of opening a window allows that energy to move.
Yeah. And that's the important thing, isn't it, is keeping things moving. I had another guest, and she had a lovely description of emotions as being like the weather. And you can't, and she was like, you can't hold on to the weather. And I think that it really sat with me that that as humans we do like to try and hold on to our emotions, don't we? And actually letting them move. And like you were saying, I mean, it's not that animals don't sometimes hold on. If they haven't been able to express them, then they do hold them. But if you, with your help, they express them, then they do move through them a lot better than humans manage to.
I mean, the word emotion means energy in motion.
Yeah.
It's meant to move. And, it's interesting, just what I'm hearing from that collective consciousness of animals is something that's really important for humans to understand. I think as a society, we're taught to sometimes deny our emotions or pretend we're okay, or be strong, put on
especially
that
the
facade,
British.
or stiff upper lip, all of that. Yes.
How are you? I'm okay.
Are you okay? No. It's really interesting because a lot of the humans that I work with will say, oh, I don't want to burden my animals. I don't want them to know what's going on. I don't want them to have to put up with my stuff. And I'm like, I'll just stop you there. Do you understand the concept of telepathic communication? And most humans have an idea. Feeling over a distance. So, animals telepathically communicate all the time, 24/7. They know what we're thinking and they know what we're feeling. So do you think you're fooling them by pretending you're okay? And then because in fact, when we pretend, when we stifle those emotions that are trying to move, that's when it actually makes it harder for our animals, because they're concerned that we're not being authentic, that we're not being real. And I know in my own practice over the years, I've healed some extraordinary trauma, that I can be in the depths of despair or rage or depression, whatever it is. If I've got an awareness of what I've got going on and I'm connected to it and taking responsibility for it, my dogs are fine. They will sit next to me. They'll lay next to me and snore.
Yeah.
I can be sometimes hysterical with emotion. Yeah. They'll be laying next to me snoring.
Yeah.
If I've got myself so busy with life that I'm not paying attention to the parts of myself that need to be heard, then my dogs are at me. And I'm like, what is going on with you? And they'll look at me and go, not us. Because, as I think so much so for the feminine, and this doesn't mean that males don't do it too, but for so long, that feminine energy of being here to serve on the planet, like, I'll have a bath when I've cooked dinner, put the kids to bed, it's like I'll do something for myself when I get to the end of my list.
Yeah.
We never get to the end of the list.
Yeah. No,
and and that's when our animals look at us and say, there's something wrong with that pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
Because you can't keep pouring from an empty cup.
No.
It's like trying to fill a bucket that's got holes in it. You'll never fill it. And, this is something that's really, really big on the planet at the moment and it's not just the feminine, it's the groups of humans, animals that have been abused, attacked, belittled for simply being who they are.
Yeah. That
they're worth less. And it's not just the feminine that's putting their hand up and saying, I'm not here to just serve. It's not just the animals that are going, I'm a sentient being. I have feelings and emotions like you. There are many different groups of humans and cultures that are putting their hands up saying, hey, I'm not less than you. It's really big on the planet at the moment.
Yeah. I was going to say our discussion about the animals is sort of like a gateway to how humans, we have this sort of hierarchy, and although we, generally speaking, it's like, humans are at the top and everything, animals and everything, plants, and and then you get down to insects. I think they're below even the plants, aren't they? Bless them, they're little things. But actually, it's like even within the humans is, like you were saying, you've got, historically in our culture, men, women slightly more suppressed, people of color, indigenous cultures, religions, all of these divides, and there is this sort of hierarchy of that within there. And it's raising a voice for the voiceless, I suppose, or those that have been suppressed.
And that's, and I describe when I say to people, I'm a voice for the animals. That's literally what I do. I communicate with them, and then I become a verbal voice on their behalf to their human or whoever it is. That's it's. I am always in awe of the incredible wisdom that exists within the animal kingdom, and I don't just mean things like dogs, cats, elephants, whales. I mean the entire animal kingdom. And the part of us that's taught, like you were saying, that snails are not as important as a cow, or a fly isn't as important as a dog. That's our ignorance and arrogance, because the animal kingdom is so finely tuned that every species, they all contribute to how that animal kingdom functions. And then we as humans who think we know better and are more intelligent come along and try to interrupt and interfere with that. And that's when it starts to fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
We, the discussions over, I guess, the last however long about how important bees are to the planet. If we don't have bees, the ramifications of that are mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's even the plants. I mean, obviously you
Yeah.
make your own essences, and that requires communication with plants, which
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
people can almost get on board a little bit with communicating with animals, but when
Yeah. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you start
Yeah.
saying that you're getting these feelings from plants, that's a whole nother level of woo woo, isn't it?
Well, if we want to talk about woo woo, I think I'm right up there in the land of woo woo. Absolutely. And the last podcast I did, bless the Tiff, who was amazing. She's just like, this is so woo woo, But if we can understand that everything is energy, and it's the energy that communicates. So, for example, I think all of us as humans have perhaps met another human or person where you just get a feeling that there's something about that person that just doesn't feel right. For some people, the hair stands up on the back of their neck, or they get goosebumps. Now, that person hasn't said anything. That's the energy communicating with each other. Now, that's what animals and children do all the time. I regularly say to people, if you really want to know what a human is like, watch young children and animals around them.
Yeah.
They'll gravitate towards an energy that is clear, that is, they will step back from, they will not want to interact with an energy that is complicated, perhaps angry, harsh, tricky, pretending,
Disconnected,
because you have to be disconnected to behave that way.
Yeah.
So it's not it sounds woo-woo, but when you realize it's energy, trees, plants, ocean, rocks, they're all energy. And if you want to look at someone like Edward Bach, for example, who was a Harley Street surgeon, who realized through his practice that he could keep treating the physical, but he realized that it was the emotional that he really needed to deal with. Yeah. And then, in his home at Brightwell cum Sotwell, then realized, now he doesn't say he talked to the plants, but he had an extraordinary level of communication in order to be able to make all those flower essences that corresponded to different emotional needs in humans. Yeah. And I think the other thing that we get wrong is that as humans, we think we're superior to animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all animals.
Yeah.
We are all animals. And there's going to be some of your listeners out there that are quite confronted by that. But hang on. No, hang on. We're all animals. It's just that we chose to be in this physical body to inhabit this time on the planet.
Yeah. I think I heard on one of your, I think it was with Tiff, your previous podcast, and I loved you said actually that when you teach people about communicating with animals, it's actually just about language and communication, and it's the same as communicating better with people. And I think we do get lost behind just our use of language, don't we, even in our communication. And actually so much of the communication we have with people isn't the words that we say, and it is all of these energies and body language and just feelings and intuitions. But we've doubted ourselves, we've been told not to, and so we shut that down. And actually by sort of opening up to communicating with animals, you actually communicate with people better.
Yeah, I think too, I was a school teacher before as a police officer, and especially in the very low, the early grades, you would hear the teachers say, use your words, use your words. Yeah. When through my experience of and now doing this for, I don't know, 17 or 18 years, something I've come to really see is that verbal communication is actually the poorest form of communication.
Yeah.
We are the only species that can say one thing and actually mean another. And people go, what do you mean by that? Well, we can lie.
Yep.
We can pretend. I can say to you, gee, Fiona, I really like those glasses you're wearing. And every ounce of my being's going, they are the worst pair of glasses I've ever seen. Because when our words don't match our feelings, what an animal will do is they'll hear your words, but they actually are tuning into us energetically, telepathically, they're tuning in. And if what we're feeling and thinking does not match our words, they disregard the words and they'll follow the feeling. So you can't lie or pretend to an animal, or, as we've seen, small children. Yeah. I can remember as a police detective, and I wasn't really conscious of it at the time because, as a police officer, you do have to disconnect to and suppress to such an extreme to be able to cope with what you see on a daily basis. But I can remember so often, in retrospect, I can go back, and it was a feeling that I would have about something that, a criminal was saying, and there were times when I just knew they were lying. I just knew that wasn't true. I just knew to just follow something. Now, I didn't realize at the time that I was following what I now know to be my knowing and my intuition. And it was like I can remember times sitting there listening to people speak and going, no, that's not true. And, some of my colleagues would say to me, how did you know that? And I'd go, I don't know, I just know.
Yep.
But in hindsight, I can see that, that's actually our true state of being. To follow our knowing and our intuition is our true state of being. But on a constant basis, we're taught to not trust that. Yeah. Because there's nothing that actually backs it up that says that's 100% correct. So one of them, I guess, really woo-woo things that happened recently was I knew I was going on a trip to work with the whales up in Queensland. About a month before, I got a really strong message that you need to make a whale essence. Now, anyone that knows anything about flower essences, the traditional way is you take parts of the plant or the flower, you put it in a bowl in water, it sits in the sunshine for 3 hours, and you then make the mother tincture from that. So my immediate reaction to making a whale essence was, one, I don't have a bowl big enough to put a whale in. And how do I sit that in the sun for 3 hours? That's what's going through my mind. So, to your listeners who go, she must have all her ducks in a row. No, that's what my logical brain did. But while my logical brain was doing that, there was a knowing part of me that said, don't worry about it. The whales will tell you what to do. I went, oh yeah, of course. I don't need to work that out. They'll tell me. So I get on the catamaran that we're on for a week. I find a glass bowl, and the first instruction I get from the whales is, you'll know exactly what time and when, because we'll let you know, but you are on a daily basis to scoop some water out of the ocean, and it's to go into the glass bowl. That will sit outside morning and day for the entire time they're on the boat. So that I'm like, what, whole 7 days? Yep, 7 days. Oh, but 7 days. That's the okay. So then what would happen on a daily basis, and what was extraordinary, was no 2 days were the same with the whales. So there was a day where they were really playful. There was a day where they were mating. There was a day where they were so calm that we actually got into the water and swam with them. Amazing. Naked, I might add. Yeah, just thought I'd throw that in. But they were so calm. And I mean, they weren't off in the distance. They were like arm's length. And they were so gentle and so calm. So each day that I collected water, there was a different aspect of their personality, if you like, of their being. And it was so precise that, the whales would come, and then I would get the message now. So I would go and get a glass, go down to the back of the catamaran, and the whale would literally come up out of the water and push the water up and scoop it into the glass. And that's what would go into the bowl each day.
Amazing.
We also had some clear crystals that one of the people brought along. So that was sitting in the bowl. And then there was, I think it was about the third or fourth day, I was talking to a couple of people about the extraordinary energy and properties of the whale, I guess, spit, if you like, the whale, when they blow.
The blowout, the top.
Blow.
Yeah.
And I actually saw a documentary some years ago where they sent a drone out to collect the blow from the whale, brought it back, and then analysed it. It has the most extraordinary, I just want to say, healing properties, cleaning properties.
Wow.
Like, it's like the scientists hadn't seen anything like it. And I remember saying to this, like we're all outside, I remember saying to the group, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if you could bottle that? Next thing, I got a message from the whales. I needed to move the glass bowl from the side of the catamaran that was on to the other side. And I'm like, why? Why? What different? Can you just move it?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I logical brain off.
Correct. Stop asking questions. So I move it. In that moment, the whale came right up next to the catamaran, blew all over us standing there and into the bowl where we were making the whale essence.
Wow.
And of course, the comment was, well, you did say, imagine if you could bottle that. So that's something that in the lead up to that trip that I could not have logically known how to do or what to do.
Yeah.
It's about when you can actually let go of the overworking left brain and trust that it mightn't make sense in the moment, but it will eventually make sense if we can follow our knowing and our intuition. And if that to me was just the extraordinary wisdom of the animal kingdom, of the whales who knew in advance exactly how it was all going to work out. And I just needed to let go of being human and allow that process to take place. So we made the whale essence. Everyone took home some mother tincture. I brought home the big bottle of mother tincture, and a number of my blends that I make, my different blends, have got the whale essence in it. So who would have thought? Who would have known?
The whales.
Yeah. There was one night, it was a full moon. Hello. We were meant to go the week before. It got changed to the week after. There was a full moon on the Thursday night. We made the mother tincture on the Friday morning. So they said to me, you need to be up all night under the full moon on the Thursday night, because they were giving me a whole lot of information and I was writing it down and just being really, I think that night there would have been 20 or 30 whales, because we were right up the very north tip. And I was standing there at one point just looking out over the full moon, over the water. It was just extraordinary. And next minute I got this message to wave. And you can see I'm scratching my head right now. In that moment I went, I couldn't see a whale. And I'm like, I'm not waving at nothing. And it's just this really stern voice of wave. Okay. So I'm waving with my left hand. At that exact moment, up comes the flipper from the whale, who then starts flapping the water and waving back.
Oh, wow.
And I went, yeah, okay. And it was just one of those moments where if I had have chosen to ignore that message, I wouldn't have got that whale wouldn't have waved back. It's just sometimes we've got to trust that our knowing is taking us to a place where we don't know what the outcome is, or we don't know where we're going. But it takes practice and it doesn't come overnight. And this is something that I teach in the workshops and when I mentor people is being in the trust. I mentor a number of children who, as they're progressing through school, are coming up against more and more, not trusting, and it's about being discerning about who you share this with, because not everybody, especially as children, not everybody is going to understand. But if you've got a handful of people, whether it be your parents or someone like me or a friend or somebody that says, keep trusting,
Yeah.
Keep following the feeling, keep that communication open.
It isn't an
Then
imaginative friend. It's
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's real. I've got one, I won't name names, but I've got one child at the moment who's experiencing that feeling of what she calls flying.
Okay.
And when we talked about it, it's her ability to be able to go to other places. And she even said to me, is that a bit strange for you? And I went, no, I travel all the time. She said, what do you mean? So when I work, for example, if I'm working with animals who might be talking about it's their time to go, I travel with them to the place that beings go when they do actually die and leave the physical body. And I can do that because I've been close to death a number of times and actually done that journey. So it's like we travel together. The animal will have a look. There's an opening, there's a doorway. It has a look and it says, no, I'm actually not ready right now. We come back, or the animal will travel with me and go, yeah, this is where I need to be now. This is where I'm traveling to. So that's how it is that I can talk to animals, humans, beings that have died, because the physical body is only the vessel that they're living in. Their energy, their soul, whatever it is, the word that you use, that's still there. That still exists. And children can do that very easily. It's just that it's not something that people talk about.
Yeah.
That's serious woo-woo for most people.
Yeah, when I was a child, I used to see ghosts, and people just think you're gone basically. But I mean, I remember we had a horse at one of the stables that I worked at, and she had died quite suddenly of I think a toxin sort of problem, caused liver failure. And I remember it was a couple of weeks later, but several times I would see her in her old stable. It's just, I think we have a big fear of death, don't we? And I think that disconnects us from a lot of what happens around death.
And I think it's interesting that we have to give a label to things. Like you said, I used to see ghosts, and the word ghost for a lot of children or people is scary.
Yeah.
And it's like, is there a ghost in my house? Is there a boogeyman? Is there there's energies everywhere all the time. And it's, not unusual for children, when they talk about their imaginary friend, they can actually, like you can actually see those energies. So, when I'm working, people go, do you see them? Yeah, I see them and I feel them. And, that then opens the door, because there are lots of times then when the human goes, I'm sure I heard my dog bark. I'm sure I saw my horse at the window. I heard my rooster crow, but that can't be. Well, yes, it can.
Yeah.
There's an extraordinary, well, I think it's extraordinary movie called Heaven is for Real.
Okay.
There's also a book. It's a true story about a boy when he was 4, and he's now, I think, I could be wrong, but like 16 or 17. He may even be older. His dad was a pastor, and at the age, I think, roughly 4, he got really sick and ended up in hospital and died for such a brief moment that it didn't even register on the monitors in the hospital. Now, in that moment, he says he went to heaven. And the movie is about what happened to him when he went to heaven and what he saw. So as a 4-year-old, he's got limited. So what was really interesting is he starts to tell his dad. And there are certain things that he starts to tell his dad that he hadn't been told by his parents and he couldn't have known. And one of the most extraordinary things was his dad and he and his sister had fair hair. His mum had dark hair. And one of the things, I don't want to give too much away, but this is just how extraordinary it was. One of the things that he says to his mum one day when they're all there, I met my sister when I was in heaven. And she said, yeah, your sister's right here. And he said, no, my other sister, the one that died in your tummy.
Wow.
And of course, mum and dad looking at each other. And then he says, and she's got dark hair like you, because all the mum ever wanted was a child with the same colour hair as her. So there's all these things that as a 4-year-old, he didn't know that his mum had lost a baby. Like, he met his grandfather, and, and he talks about, he met Jesus. Now, it's not about being religious, but he talks about Jesus's eyes and how, like, they're this really amazing colour blue. So Dad, being a pastor, gets all these pictures and photos. Is this the one you saw? No, the eyes are wrong. No, the eyes are wrong. That's not his eyes. Then there's a young girl in an Eastern country, something, it's not Bulgaria, but it's something like that, who painted this extraordinary picture of Jesus. She'd never been in a church. She didn't know anything about religion. She painted this extraordinary picture that one of the pastor's congregation sent him, and he calls his son in and he goes, look at this picture. He goes, that's him. That's the man I met. That's his eyes. So, our logical brain says that can't be possible. Yet there is a living being, human, on the planet that says, that's what happened to me as a 4-year-old. That's what I saw. And it was really interesting because he was talking about his grandfather with glasses, and his dad said, my grandfather had glasses. And the young boy said, no, grandfather, your grandfather didn't wear glasses. And his dad's got a picture going, yeah, here he is with glasses. And the little boy said, no, because in heaven, no people or animals are sick. And that's something that I get asked often when I'm working after animals have died. Are they happy? Are they in pain? And that's the one thing that I can feel when I travel out to check in with them, is that they've left the physical body that was experiencing the pain or the trauma or whatever it was. And there's this extraordinary feeling of lightness and relief. And there's such a vibrancy about their energy that when they show a picture to their humans of what their body would be like, it's like they're in their prime. That's the best way to describe it. Now, to our logical brain, that doesn't make sense. But for me, when I am explaining that verbally to a human, I get goosebumps because every ounce of my knowing goes, yeah, that's right. And I remember watching that movie and then reading the book going, yeah, that's right. That feels right for me.
I think because we've got stuck in this kind of linear perception of time, haven't we? And actually, I think my connection with nature and animals has kind of given me a realization that everyone experiences time on a very different timescale. I mean, some of the ancient trees, the California redwoods, English oaks, they experience time or in a scale that we can't comprehend. And likewise, the sort of life cycle of some of the insects and things, which is, this infinitesimal difference. And I mean, and even if you're then honest with yourself, you think, well, actually, time isn't consistent, is it? No. You can, how many times do you say, gosh, that's gone quickly, or it's, that feels like a lifetime, or, and it's,
And animals don't measure time. Something else I teach in my workshops is, a lot of humans will say, I'll be back at 2, or I'll be back at 3:30. And the animal goes, I don't know what a 2 is. I don't know what a 3:30 is. Or one more sleep, how we do it with children, one more sleep till Santa comes. And of course, animals might have 10 sleeps. So they're like, I've had my sleep. So
where are you?
And they do not measure time. So, people will often say to me, I don't know why my animal reacts the way it does. I can be gone for 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, and the reaction's the same. And it's like, because We measure time, and we're often controlled by time. They don't. They don't measure time organically like we do. So, simple things like if you're going away, for example, and you want to communicate to your animals that you're going, talk in darks, talk in nights and days, dark and light. Yeah. Because an animal knows what the dark is, what the nighttime is. It knows what the daytime is. Oh, something really simple, but something that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
I'll hear people say, I'll be back in a short while. A short while. But if you use the color of the sky, for example, if you're going down to the shops and you're going to be an hour, pretty much the skyline's going to be very similar in an hour's time. But if you go to work in the morning and you come back in the evening, the skyline's going to be very different. The sun's going to be in a completely different place. The sun might have set. The darkness might have come. It might be the time that you feed them. So you use a lot of pictures and cues to assist your verbal words, because again, that our verbal communication is really, really poor.
Yeah.
It's the simplicity that makes sense. They don't know if the big hand's on the 12 and the little hand's on the 3, that's 3 o'clock. They don't know that.
Yeah.
That's human stuff. Yeah. It's sometimes the simplicity of the animal kingdom that I find to be what's the word? Just so easy to work with, because we say simple is not intelligent or not clever. Yeah. As humans, we overcomplicate, overanalyze, make things a lot harder than they have to be. And I have mentioned a few times that the word that animals use, and it is not a derogatory term, is that humans are retarded. And retard means to hold back. Okay. Because when we keep doing the same thing and complicating and getting in our own way, we hold ourselves back from what's possible.
And I think was just coming in my head then was actually that's why we find being in nature so nurturing, is because we don't, it is simple, isn't it? It's we can get out of our own way and just get back to this sort of easier, more simple feeling, I guess, and more energy, isn't it? Which is why it's so healing, isn't it, in this?
Yeah. It's the balance, and we can't, well, I shouldn't say we can't. Most of us are unable to live in nature all the time, but a lot of us spend very little time in nature. We are out of balance. This is something that's sort of shifting and changing, or being asked to shift and change on the planet at the moment. The imbalance, like we were talking before, the imbalance of the masculine and the feminine, the imbalance of some, ethnic and cultural groups compared to other, the imbalance, it doesn't work. And one is a very simple, it's a very simple instruction that the animals are, and the planet and Mother Earth are continually asking of us, and that is being present in the moment. Now that sounds really simple,
but it's really hard.
But for someone like me, I'm really good at being present for others. I'm really good working all day long, consulting and holding the space and being present for the animals and their humans. I have to work extraordinarily hard at being present for myself. But if I don't find the time to be present for myself, then things get out of balance and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it sounds really simple when our animals say, could you be more present? Yeah, sure. And then you go, and how do I do that?
And then you just go, oh, wait, I've got this really long to-do list.
Hang on.
I'll schedule some.
I'll just do the washing, and then I'll just do the shopping, or I'll cook dinner for the kids, or, whatever it is. I'll pick up the dry cleaning for my hubby, whatever it is. And then I'll get to it. And then, of course, it's whatever time it is at night, you fall into bed, you get out the next one and you do the same thing. We don't have to sit and meditate for hours on end to be present.
No.
I was working with a client, I think it was yesterday, and she was like, I haven't got the time to be present for my animals. And I'm like, they're not asking for an hour, because you can spend an hour with someone or some with another being and not be present, or you could spend 5 or 10 minutes where you put the world aside and actually go, you know what, I'm right here, right now. 5 minutes, 10 minutes of, you know what, I'm just going to sit outside. Well, you can't because it's winter, but I'm just going to sit outside with my back against the tree trunk, or I'm just going to sit and look at the pot plant on my windowsill, or just 5 or 10 minutes. Or while I'm boiling the kettle, I'm actually going to just listen to what wildlife or bird life or noises are right here, right now. What can I hear right here, right now?
And it is hard. I think, and I think that's why people don't do it, isn't it? Because they think, oh, I'm going to do this, and then it's like, you sit there and it's sort of that common sort of idea of meditation, isn't it? It's sort of you sit there and like 30 seconds later your brain's gone off on like, oh, I need to oh my God, have I written down that I need to buy that next time at the shops, or oh, it's so and so's birthday tomorrow, or like next week, and I must remember to, oh, I need to do this at work, or it is very difficult. But I think, like you say, just let that happen as well. It's like, it's emotion as well, isn't it? It's like, let that be the weather, let it, don't try and hold on to it, let it move, just sit there. And it's like, okay, we'll get to that later, let me just come back to listening, or the bird, or what bird's that. And it's a practice.
It's very simple but incredibly profound. And I know for me, that's where there's been an incredible imbalance for me between my masculine and my feminine. Being a police officer is very much a doing, get things done, catch the crook, get the crime solved. But, and I watch myself now always doing. And that's a very masculine do, go, tick off the list. And it's a big journey for me right now to actually start to reconnect to that feminine energy that had to be suppressed in order to survive 17 years as a police officer. And when I was a female detective, was very rare to come out of uniform and be a detective. That was quite rare. So you were really literally working with men and expected to be not as good as men, but better. You're always proving, you're always doing, you're always achieving. And that's a very masculine energy. And again, there's that imbalance. And you don't have to have been a police officer to realize that when you're in your masculine energy, you'll do, go, tick off the list, I think, again, there's a big imbalance in a lot of us between the masculine and the feminine.
There is, and in men as well, not just, obviously as women, a lot of when you talk about feminine, people often misconstrue that as, the masculine is negative, and it's not. Everyone needs a balance of both. Men need a balance of the feminine as well as women needing a balance of the masculine, and that's the feminine has been suppressed in all of us. And
we've all, and I think there are still some people learning or understanding that in all of us there is the feminine and the masculine. And it's not just females who are feminine, it's not just men who are masculine. We need to have a balance of both in all of us.
And
absolutely.
There are some women who are they don't have the balance, and you see they do need to bring in some of the masculine traits, and but equally you see men who are beautifully balanced as well, don't you? Who do have both the masculine and the feminine, and and it's
again, it's our stereotype, isn't it? We stereotype men have to be this way, women have to be this way, children have to be this way, and that ethnic group has to behave that way, and that culture has to. It's like, get out of your own way. Just, we're very very quick to judge. We're very quick to stereotype. We're very quick to, all dogs do this and all cavaliers do this and all geldings do this and, all cows do, or bulls. We're like, no, stop. Because every being, whether it be human, animal, whatever it is, has its own unique personality.
Yeah.
And has its own unique feelings and emotions and life story. Whether it lives in a dog body, a cow body, a female body, a male body, they've got their own, it's like saying a particular group of people all behave that way, or a particular group or ethnicity all behave that way. No. I have, when I work with animals, people say to me, oh, German Shepherds all, and I'm like, okay, there are certain traits that you will get, but then within the German Shepherd group, there's their own unique personalities and life stories.
I find that because I love Jack Russell's little terrier dogs, and I think I've had 3 or 4 now, and everyone always says to me, oh, but yours don't yap, because they're known to be like these yappy little dogs. And I'm like, no, I've never had a yappy one. And it's like, yeah.
And we stereotype Rottweilers. They're all aggressive.
Yeah.
Are they? Oh, Jack Russells, they're all yappy. Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Like, again, we stereotype, which then stifles their actual unique personality that's trying to because we have an expectation of that's how they should behave.
Yeah. And we
do it to each other.
Yeah.
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 We do.
Oh.
We do. Yeah. It's again, I'm just going to use it. The animals are just like, that's part of that retarded behavior that animals see in humans.
Yeah. I think it's something that we can, this is the thing with this conversation. It's about drawing awareness to things, and then looking how, with that awareness, we can take the little steps to do things a little bit better in the future. And I think we're coming up to about an hour, and I just want to say, is there anything else on your heart that you would like to share with the listeners today?
I think it's just being open to the possibility of, because for some people they may listen to this and go, oh, I can never do that. It's being open to the possibility of maybe I could try it and see how it goes. Yeah. Because, if someone had said to me when I was a police officer, years from now, you'll be communicating with animals, you'll be traveling the world, teaching workshops, you'll be making your own different blends to help the animals and help the humans. I would have laughed hysterically and said to them, now you've lost your mind. And, I remember when the end of my policing career came about, I had no idea what the next step was. But I did in my heart of heart know that I was going to be okay, and that all my entire life journey and all that I had experienced, all the trauma that I had been through, what I did know was that was going to help me in what I chose to do next. And one thing that all the animals always say, there is no expectation from them that we have to get it 100% right all the time. I don't. I have days where I'm so disconnected that, I'm so busy doing and helping others. But what they genuinely do know is when we are trying.
Yeah.
When we actually sit down with our animals, whether it be our own animals, whether it be a bird sitting in the tree, whether it be whatever it is, whether it be a flower in our garden, whether it be a tree that's growing, nearby our home. When we stop just for a few minutes and go into that curious, childlike wonder of, well, what about if I just sit here and see what comes?
Yeah.
What about if I just start there?
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I have struggled with perfectionism, so
That's why we get along so well.
I can relate to people who might be sitting here listening, thinking, "Oh, but if I'm going to do something, I have to do
I
it
have to do it
perfectly."
perfect. Mhm.
And yeah, and it does get in our way, and it stops us. And I think it's just trying, and
Yeah,
whatever you're doing, and if you want to do something to help the natural world, it's just try something small. And
yeah, yeah,
and if you've been struggling yourself, just trying, like you said, 5 minutes a day, just
yeah,
step out, even if you're in a flat, just step out of the
yeah,
door and into a
yeah,
park. Or
yeah,
yeah, if you've got a garden, then just to stand there, even in the cold in winter, you can manage
yeah,
5 minutes. And
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah,
then just
even standing looking out the window at, that's why I said before, even a pot plant on your windowsill, herbs that you've got growing. Just, it's one thing too that's just coming through really strongly. When I'm working and I'm translating, if you like, from the animal to the human language can be so restrictive sometimes that I'll find, I'll use a word and the animal will go, that's the wrong word. And it's in that moment where, you're talking about perfectionism and not getting it right. It's in that moment that I'll actually verbally say to the human, hang on, I've got the wrong word. Your animal's just said to me, that's not quite right. So I'll just sit quietly for a few seconds and the animal will say, this is the better word. For example, I was working in the UK some years ago and I was working with a horse who I described as a diva. And she actually physically shook her head and she said, no, 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 I'm not a diva, I'm a princess. And the human went, what's the difference? And when you actually think about it, the energy of the word diva
yeah,
is quite different to the energy of the
yeah,
word princess.
yeah,
So it's we are not going to get it 100% perfect. But what I've learned is when you're open and when you can remain somewhat humble and realize that there's extraordinary wisdom in the animal kingdom, if you can step out of that expectation and arrogance that humans are superior to animals, there's extraordinary knowledge and wisdom and understanding there. So just be open and curious to what can I learn? What can I feel? What can I, and, maybe start keeping a journal of, I sat with my dog the other day and I could feel my heart. Or like you were saying, I stood by that pony and I started to cry. Just open the door to the possibility of what might come.
yeah,
It's an extraordinary world.
yeah,
It really is.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Kerrie, for all your
You're
time.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's been an amazing journey on, just so many things. So thank you.
You're welcome. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.